Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Melting Snowflakes. Wanted to talk this time a little bit about this narrative that I keep getting put out by every minority group, so-called social justice warrior group, every group that's trying to claim victimhood and who's the highest victimhood. And this includes Mexican or Latino illegal immigrants, transgender, just everybody that claims victimhood and wants their status rolled up to the top as if they were the number one victim, because that seems to be the only collateral nowadays in the media is your victimhood status. And specifically, what comes to mind is a Latino reporter talking about illegal immigrants as the most vulnerable members of our society. Another one was a transgender guy, a guy trying to be a lady, on Tucker Carlson's show, claiming that, he's working to protect the most vulnerable members of society. Okay, and I'm utterly disgusted with this narrative, because let's break it down. Let's think about this with the most people, the most effect, and in some reality here. Who are the most vulnerable? Well, the obvious that comes to mind for me is children. Okay, every race, creed, denomination, most vulnerable, hands down, are children, because they cannot defend themselves, right? A 4-year-old child does not have the capability to protect themselves against a grown man or woman. They just don't. Okay, so then that brings me to the second most vulnerable in our society. That would be the elderly, right? Elderly that have reached a state of infirmment or feeble. They aren't as vulnerable as a 4-year-old child, but they would be potentially very vulnerable to an adult male or woman in good health. They would be subject to that person's will if that person, man or woman, wanted to enforce their will upon them. Okay? So these are the real most vulnerable members of our society. And let's not get it twisted. Children can't speak out for themselves, right? So they're not getting necessarily the attention, because they can't rabble-rouse and say, hey, I'm being abused, I'm being molested, I'm being all these things that we all know happen to children and we all hate. Elderly, in most cases, they're too proud to admit the abuse that's being implied upon them, because they've lived their whole lives independently, and now they're relying on other people to, care for them, provide for them, or assist them. They want some sense of pride. And pride can be a very powerful thing to allow yourself to be subjugated to mistreatment, torture, the full realm, without disclosing it, because pride is a foundation of humanity. These are the real most vulnerable members of our society. And they're not getting the coverage or the protections or the moral outcry that they really should be getting, because the children can't speak out for themselves, and in most cases the elderly are too proud to speak out for themselves. So instead you've got the social justice warrior, illegal immigrant reporter saying, I represent the most vulnerable member of society, referring to illegal immigrants. Well, an illegal immigrant that's a child, 4, 5, 12 years old, I would agree. But I'm not looking at them as an illegal immigrant. I'm looking at their vulnerability as the child that they are. The majority of illegal immigrants are not children, and they are not disabled, and they are not elderly. Okay? You can't be disabled or elderly and make it across the crossing in a lot of cases and survive. So they're able-bodied, people that can defend themselves in most cases against most other adults. These are not the most vulnerable members of society. Transgender movement, okay? Especially in the U.S., you notice this really doesn't go on in many other countries that I'm aware of. But in the United States, transgender or not, you have the protections of being a U.S. citizen. So your basic civil liberties, because you're transgender, doesn't give another U.S. citizen does not have the right to walk up and assault you, okay? Or else they face criminal prosecution, right? They don't have the right to come and take something from you because you're transgender. They have those protections under the law as an adult. So how are they the most vulnerable? They're not. Children that are now being transgendered, children don't even know what they want. How can you possibly push for and back up an institution or a family or a people that are allowing these children to completely change their hormones when their mind hasn't even developed enough to understand what they really want? It's just insane to me. So this video, it's basically, we need to come back to the reality, people, of who are the most vulnerable. And if you truly want to affect and help those are the most vulnerable, get involved in your local Boys and Girls Club. Mentor a child. Help them out. Go to your local church or go to a local community center or a senior living home and sit down and play cards with a senior. Talk to them. Just because they're old, they're not stupid. A lot of them have a lot of wisdom that you can actually learn from. Experience beats most all teaching, people. So this is just to get a conversation started about who the real most vulnerable people are. And secondary to that, let's concentrate on who the real most vulnerable are that are citizens. Our first priority, I'm not saying all priority, but our first priority should be taking care of our citizens that are the most vulnerable in our society first. Once we've got that in order, if you want to go out and, you know, help illegal aliens or missionary to Africa to help them, go for it. But until we clean up our own house, I highly caution you to not judge the U.S. society. So this is the end of another episode of Melting Snowflakes. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it gets you thinking. And like and subscribe. That way I can keep on doing this stuff for you and we can keep the conversation going. Thanks, guys.